A lawsuit inside Joe Gibbs Racing has suddenly become one of the biggest stories in NASCAR, and when Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin finally spoke about Chris Gabehart at COTA, the tension inside the garage became impossible to ignore. Instead, the biggest topic inside the garage was a lawsuit. Joe Gibbs Racing had filed legal action involving longtime crew chief Chris Gabehart. The situation had been quietly developing behind the scenes for weeks, but at COTA, it finally burst into public view. Reporters began asking questions. Drivers were suddenly put on the spot. And when two of the sport's biggest stars spoke about it, the entire story grew even larger. Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin rarely stay quiet when controversy appears in NASCAR. Both drivers have built reputations for speaking their minds, even when the situation is uncomfortable. At COTA, they once again lived up to that reputation. During media sessions over the race weekend, Busch addressed the growing legal controversy. His comments quickly spread through the garage area and across the NASCAR world. The lawsuit was no longer just a private dispute between team management and a crew chief. It had become one of the biggest off-track storylines of the 2026 season. To understand why this situation is drawing so much attention, it helps to understand what Joe Gibbs Racing represents inside NASCAR. For more than 3 decades, Joe Gibbs Racing has been one of the most powerful organizations in the sport. Founded by Hall of Fame coach Joe Gibbs, the team built its reputation on discipline, precision, and championship-level performance. The organization has produced multiple Cup Series titles and has consistently fielded some of the strongest cars on the grid. Drivers like Tony Stewart, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin helped shape the team's modern identity. Championships were won. Daytona 500 victories were celebrated. The organization became a cornerstone of the NASCAR garage. Because of that legacy, any internal conflict involving Joe Gibbs Racing immediately attracts attention. Chris Gabehart became a central figure in that success during the modern era of the team. Known for his sharp strategic mind and calm leadership on the pit box, Gabehart earned respect throughout the garage. His work as a crew chief played a major role in several competitive seasons for Joe Gibbs Racing drivers. Crew chiefs are often the hidden architects behind great NASCAR performances. They manage the race strategy, guide the car setup, and communicate constantly with the driver during competition. When the chemistry between driver and crew chief is strong, the entire team benefits. Gabehart built that kind of relationship with his drivers. He was known as someone who could make smart decisions under pressure and keep the team focused during chaotic race situations. That is part of what makes the current lawsuit so surprising. The details of the legal dispute are still unfolding, but the fact that it involves a high-level crew chief and one of the most powerful organizations in NASCAR has turned it into a major story. Lawsuits inside racing teams are rare. Most disagreements are handled privately. Teams typically try to avoid public disputes that could create distractions during the season. But once legal filings appear, the situation becomes impossible to keep quiet. At Circuit of the Americas, reporters immediately began asking drivers about the issue. The NASCAR garage is a tight community. News travels quickly through the haulers and motorhomes. Even drivers not directly involved often hear details through team members or industry contacts. Kyle Busch was one of the first drivers asked about the situation. Busch has always been known for his honesty in front of a microphone. He does not avoid difficult questions, and he rarely delivers safe answers. At COTA, he acknowledged that the lawsuit had become a major topic of conversation around the garage. His comments suggested that the situation had caught many people by surprise. Even in a sport filled with intense competition and strong personalities, legal battles inside top teams remain uncommon. Busch also emphasized how distractions like this can affect the atmosphere of a racing organization. NASCAR teams rely heavily on trust and communication. Engineers, mechanics, crew chiefs, and drivers must all work together under enormous pressure. When internal conflict becomes public, it can change the entire mood inside a team. Denny Hamlin soon added his voice to the discussion. Hamlin is not just a driver, he is also a team owner with 2311 Racing. That dual role gives him a unique perspective on situations involving management and team personnel. When Hamlin spoke about the lawsuit, many people in the NASCAR world listened closely. Hamlin acknowledged that legal disputes in motorsports can become complicated quickly. Contracts, intellectual property, and team responsibilities are all tightly structured inside modern racing organizations. When disagreements occur, they sometimes escalate beyond internal negotiations. NASCAR script pronunciation. Conversion. His comments highlighted another important point. While drivers focus primarily on performance, the business side of NASCAR continues running in the background at all times. Sponsorship deals, team partnerships, and employment contracts shape the sport just as much as on-track results. The Gabehart lawsuit is now a reminder of how those business realities can suddenly become public. Inside the COTA garage, the tension surrounding the situation was noticeable. Crew members quietly discussed the news between practice sessions. Team officials moved carefully through media areas. Everyone understood that the story was gaining attention across the racing world. Yet, at the same time, the competition of a race weekend continued. Drivers still had to prepare for one of the most physically demanding tracks on the schedule. Circuit of the Americas pushes both machines and drivers to their limits. The track's complex layout forces drivers to stay mentally sharp for every single lap. While the legal situation unfolded off the track, teams still focused on qualifying setups, tire strategies, and race pace. But it was clear that the lawsuit had become part of the atmosphere surrounding the weekend. For Joe Gibbs Racing, the timing of the controversy is far from ideal. The early portion of the NASCAR season is when teams try to build momentum. Strong results in the opening races can set the tone for the entire year. Drivers aim to secure playoff points and establish themselves as championship contenders. Off-track distractions can disrupt that focus. Even when drivers avoid discussing the situation publicly, team members still feel the pressure. Engineers preparing setups and mechanics building cars are aware of the headlines. The constant presence of cameras and reporters adds another layer of intensity. That is why most organizations work so hard to keep internal disputes private. In this case, the lawsuit has pushed the conflict into the spotlight, whether the team wanted it there or not. For fans watching from outside the garage, the situation offers a rare look into the complicated world behind NASCAR competition. Race results often dominate headlines, but the inner workings of teams are rarely discussed in detail. This story reminds people that racing organizations are complex businesses. They involve contracts, leadership decisions, and high-stakes financial investments. When disagreements emerge, they can quickly grow into something larger than anyone expected. As the 2026 season continues, the legal case will likely remain a topic of discussion across the NASCAR community. Court proceedings move slowly compared to the pace of a racing season. While drivers compete each weekend at tracks across the country, lawyers and team representatives will continue handling the dispute behind the scenes.